The Department of Homeland Security funding shutdown ends. We examine the toll of 76 days of gridlock, uncertainty, and financial hardship. The war in Iran, the ceasefire, it's holding. But negotiations are stalled. The ripple effects, tight energy supplies, price spikes, recession risks. Yes, there's an angry AI trial going on featuring Elon Musk and Sam Altman. But what about a potentially bigger AI story? Widespread and unstoppable job losses. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in New York. Welcome to the Takeout. The Department of Homeland Security funding shutdown is over. The House today passed a Senate bill it could have passed almost a month ago, but for internal GOP squabbles that stalled that bill and many other pieces of legislation. Paralysis, we should observe, is now a worrisome hallmark of the disorganized House GOP majority. Now, it would be wrong to say the standoff over DHS funding was over nothing or that it was a result of standard partisan division. It was not. Democrats demanded changes to immigration enforcement tactics after the shooting deaths at the hands of federal agents of Renee Good and Alex Pretty in Minneapolis. The Trump administration, under mounting political pressure, made some administrative changes to those tactics. Democrats wanted those changes and other stiffer reforms written into law. And there, the standoff began. And as it progressed, other things occurred. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, as an example, was fired. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons announced his departure. Gregory Bovino, Commander-at-Large of Customs and Border Patrol, retired. These three were the faces of immigration crackdowns in Minneapolis, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Democrats did not change immigration tactics through legislation, but personnel changed during this time of the shutdown. There were other changes as well. Hundreds of TSA agents quit for lack of predictable paychecks. You remember long lines at airports snarled spring break travel. The White House had to use executive orders to shift unspent federal funds around to pay some DHS employees, a tactic that might not have even been legal, but nobody really objected because it was a better alternative than relying on a dysfunctional Congress. To put some of this in starkly functional terms, my colleague Nicole Skanga interviewed Coast Guard Commandant Admiral Kevin Lunday.
We have over 6,000 utility bills that have been unpaid because DHS is not funded. And so now we're starting to see electricity, water, natural gas, other services shut off that are impacting not only our operational units and bases where our people work, but starting to impact where people live.
Members of the Coast Guard going around with flashlights until the lights can be turned back on.
It seems like a horror movie, but it's actually happening. It's almost unbelievable.
Believe it. It happened. Now, mercifully, it's over. For more, we turn to Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill to tell us how it ended. Nicole.
Well, the reality, Major, is that this ended in the blink of an eye. And really, if you weren't paying attention to the House floor, you would have missed this entire vote happening because there wasn't a regular vote where you normally see that tally of lawmakers. Instead, this was done by a simple voice vote. Boom, boom, done. We looked up and the Department of Homeland Security was magically funded. Now, this, of course, comes after more than 70 days of funding lapse. And it really begs the question, why didn't the House act sooner? Because at the end of the day, what they ended up passing was this compromise bill that was passed in the Senate, similar fashion, by the way, not with all 100 senators, but early in the morning with just a few senators in the room through a process called unanimous consent where they just rushed it through. But this was a compromise measure that in essence funds the remainder of the Department of Homeland Security, things like FEMA, things like the Coast Guard, TSA. What it doesn't include is funding for immigration enforcement. That will be handled separately through a party line process known as reconciliation, where Republicans have crafted a longer term measure to fund those entities to the tune of some $70 billion over the next 3 years. So in the interim, the rest of DHS will be funded through the rest of the fiscal year, and then we'll have to start this process all over again in just a matter of months.
And Nicole, I also want to ask you about an important conversation you had with two members of the Louisiana Democratic delegation, Cleo Fields, Troy Carter. They are the sum total of the Louisiana Democratic delegation, about what the Supreme Court did yesterday and the implications for them. Take it away.
Yeah, that's right. And it's really notable because they represent the only two majority-minority districts in the state of Louisiana, which are at the center of this Supreme Court ruling, Louisiana versus Calais. So in essence, what occurred is that one of these lawmakers, in particular, Cleo Fields, his district was really at the center, at the heart of this case. And late today, we heard from the Louisiana Secretary of State, who has announced that House races will be put on hold. You know, the primaries were due to start next month, and so those House races are going to be put on hold in light of this Supreme Court decision. Here's what Congressman Fields, as well as Congressman Troy Carter, told me about the Supreme Court's ruling Wednesday.
Look, I plan to defend the seat no matter what, but listen, I've defended the seat before. I mean, look, I've never served in this Congress without being under legal attack, for the constitutionality of my district. So this is nothing new to me.
The reality is this is much deeper and much further than Louisiana. This can impact up to 19 or 20 seats in the Congressional Black Caucus. It can impact school boards. It can impact city councils, legislative seats. This is, in fact, an explosive move to turn the clock back all the way pre-1965.
Now, both Congressman Carter and Congressman Fields told me that they were expecting early voting to get underway in their primaries this Saturday. But with this announcement from the Secretary of State, while other races in the state are expected to proceed, those House races will not, due to this Supreme Court decision. So we will stay tuned as far as next steps. But as you heard both members tell me, they both intend to defend their seats and to keep trying to move forward in light of this Supreme Court decision, Major.
Quite a bit in flux. Nicole Killian, thank you very much. Virginia Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw joins me now. He also serves on the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, good to see you. We'll get to redistricting in a second. It matters in the Commonwealth of Virginia, lots of other jurisdictions nationally. But I mentioned you're on the House Oversight Committee. So tell me what you expect to hear when former Attorney General Pam Bondi, who had tried to delay this, appears before the committee May 29th about the Epstein matter.
Well, I think she tried to avoid it completely, and thankfully we held her feet to the fire. We filed contempt charges this week, and I think that led to her finally agreeing to come in. And I want to hear who made the decisions to illegally redact files that were illegally redacted, who made the decisions not to fully release the files as the law required, what conversations, if any, took place between Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi, or Pam Bondi and President Trump, about which files to redact and which files not to redact. Look, the Department of Justice violated the law with respect to the release of the files. They're in violation of the Oversight Committee's subpoena, and she was Attorney General while those violations took place. She's going to have to answer for that.
Congressman, you said it was a slap in the face for King Charles III not to meet with survivors of Jeffrey Epstein while he was making his trip to America. Did you have a higher expectation the king would visit with survivors, or President Trump?
Well, I don't think President Trump ever will. I had hoped that King Charles would take advantage of the opportunity to sit with some of the survivors who wanted to meet with him so that he could reassure them that from his perspective, there would be transparency and accountability in the UK for anyone who violated the law or violated the rights of those women and girls, even if it included his brother. I think that was a missed opportunity. We should note, we're talking about Pam Bondi. She also had refused to meet with survivors in the wake of her testimony before Congress several months ago.
Congressman, I want to ask you about the war costs. $25 billion said by the Pentagon yesterday. Our CBS News reporting today has said that's only half the war costs so far with Iran, up to $50 billion. Your evaluation of that number?
Well, one, it's outrageous that the administration and Secretary Hegseth this week have not been honest with Congress, or more importantly, the American people, about the true costs of this war. And the American people know that they're the ones paying the costs, not just in their taxpayer dollars that are being spent day in and day out there, but in higher gas prices, higher fertilizer prices, higher home interest rates, all because of Donald Trump's war of choice in Iran. So they need to come straight with the American people, let us know how much this is costing, and then Congress should make the decision, in my view, to cut off the funding for this unauthorized, reckless war in Iran.
I mentioned redistricting. Voters in Virginia approved a new map in that Commonwealth. It has now been challenged before the state Supreme Court. How do you expect that to be resolved? And what is your overall take, Congressman, on the arms race of redistricting that's now been given even more fuel by the Supreme Court's decision yesterday?
I expect the Virginia Supreme Court to uphold the will and the decision of Virginia voters and uphold the new map that Virginia voters voted to implement. With respect to redistricting across the country, obviously yesterday's decision from the Supreme Court lights a match on that redistricting war. And I would say that Republican politicians in the South now have a choice. They can continue to raise the stakes, and Democrats will counter. We could draw a map of California or New York that eliminates probably every Republican that represents those states in Congress. I don't think that would be a healthy thing for the country, just like it's not a healthy thing for the country for Republican politicians to eliminate Democratic districts that are held by members of the Congressional Black Caucus here in Congress. So the option, what we should do, is join hands. Republicans should join us in a ban on partisan gerrymandering nationally for congressional districts. We could do that before the 2028 elections and put an end to this redistricting war.
On this program last night, Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman said he doesn't understand why Democrats cannot side with the Trump administration in pursuit of forcing Iran to give up its pursuit of a nuclear weapon and finish the job. Those are his words, not mine. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'd like to hear Senator Fetterman's plan to do that, just like I'd like to hear Donald Trump or Secretary Hegseth's plan to do that. There is no credible plan to get Iran to give up their nuclear weapons. I would love to see that. I would love to see a negotiation that leads to that result. That's not where we are. We're in the same negotiating position, perhaps a weaker negotiating position today than we were before the war. They're negotiating around the same elements. Is it a 5-year suspension or a 20-year suspension of their nuclear program? The only difference is they closed the Strait of Hormuz, and Donald Trump's under more pressure now than he was before the war. So we're farther away from a deal to eliminate their nuclear program than we were 2 months ago.
What are your constituents telling you about gas prices?
That they're too damn high. Gas prices in Virginia have eclipsed $4 a gallon. Diesel prices are higher. They're sick and tired of paying for Trump's war in Iran and Trump's tariffs, because the high gas prices are on top of high grocery costs, high costs for parents who are getting ready to buy back to school supplies or new clothes for their kids for the next school year. All of those costs are piling up on Virginians, and they're sick and tired of it.
I mentioned in the open to this program, Congressman, that Democrats did not get what they sought to get in the standoff over DHS funding, meaning legislatively drafted and imposed changes in immigration enforcement tactics. But personnel did change. Kristi Noem, Todd Lyons, Gregory Bovino. Was that worth it?
Well, look, from my perspective, Democrats didn't force a shutdown of DHS. Republicans needed some of our votes. And Democrats like me said, if you need my vote to fund the Department of Homeland Security, you got to listen to my priorities and put some of these reforms in the statute. We didn't accomplish that in large part because of one guy, Stephen Miller, in the White House, who doesn't want it to happen. We're going to continue to fight that. We might have to take that fight to the ballot box and try to convince the voters, who I think are on our side on this issue, that we want common sense reforms. ICE and CBP should operate like our local and state law enforcement, without masks, with real use of force standards, with real professionalism that they haven't shown.
Virginia Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw, appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Edward Fishman joins me now. He's a former Russian and European sanctions lead at the United States State Department. He's also, important for this conversation, author of a great book, Choke Points, American Power in the Age of Economic Warfare. Well, how is our economic power in the age of warfare going? Summarize the title for me. How's it working out in Iran?
So look, the United States clearly has much more ability to impose economic pain on Iran than Iran can on the United States.
Right.
I mean, the Iranian economy is collapsing right now. The blockade is largely working. The challenge is, in terms of will, the Iranian regime is fighting for survival, and Trump hasn't quite figured out what we're fighting for. Is it trying to get rid of Iran's nuclear program? Is it sinking their navy? Is it just reopening the Strait of Hormuz? And so I do worry that in sort of a battle of endurance, the United States may not come out on top, even though we have the stronger weapons.
And does the theocratic origins of this Islamic regime, born in a revolution in 1979, matter in this equation?
I think it does, but I'd also say that, just the sheer inhumanity of the Iranian regime matters too. I mean, you look at what happened earlier this year.
Meaning the costs they're willing to impose on their own people.
Exactly. I mean, earlier this year.
That are not just economic, let's be clear.
Right, mass protests where you had tens of thousands of innocent Iranians who were gunned down and killed by the regime. So look, I think that this is a terrible regime. We'd all be better off by getting rid of them. But to the congressman's point just now, there's not really a credible plan that I've seen yet to actually make that happen.
And as I've read, this is not an acute energy supply problem for the United States, but it is becoming one worrisome in Europe and in Asia, with even conversation now about recessions either in Europe and Asia as a result of energy supply shortages and price spikes.
That's exactly right. And look, I mean, thankfully, we haven't had shortages in the United States. We're the world's biggest producer of both oil and natural gas. But for over a month now, you've seen real shortages in the developing world, Thailand, Sri Lanka, the Philippines. You have COVID-like conditions where people are being told they have to work from home, they're rationing gasoline. And now you're starting to see it play out in in the developed world too. In Europe and Asia, you see big airlines that are cutting back flights and raising ticket prices because of jet fuel shortages. Look, we are somewhat insulated, but we're not immune to this, right? And as oil prices go up, we still live in a global oil market. It's going to hit Americans at the pump. It's already hitting us at the pump, and it's going to play into inflation. So we're not totally immune to this. It's just going to hit us last, probably.
And when I read energy analysts who are pretty experienced in the region, they say, yes, if there is a deal, prices will go down, but they're not going to fall dramatically. And there's a phrase in the oil industry that prices go up in an elevator and they come down the stairs, meaning much more slowly. Yeah. Evaluate that for me.
I think that's right, because we have to remember.
I mean, we could have a hard summer price-wise, even if there's a deal.
100%. We're going to have a very difficult summer because you just have to think about the cumulative impact, right? Since the beginning of this war, we've lost over 500 million barrels of oil that otherwise would have gone on the market, right? You can't go back in time and produce those. And so there are going to be shortages. There are going to be tighter markets for gasoline, for jet fuel. It's going to lead to higher airline ticket prices, higher prices at the pump for Americans, almost inevitably.
One other thing you'd like my audience to know about what the situation is and what you might suggest to them to pay attention to.
Sure. So there's been this narrative out there that the Iranian oil sector is going to collapse under the blockade, that I think Trump said the pipes are going to blow up or something like that. What I would just maybe encourage viewers to take a look at, in 2020, in the wake of Trump's initial maximum pressure strategy and amid COVID, Iran's oil sales went all the way down to 200,000 barrels a day. Right now, they're over, they're 1.52 million barrels a day. So they got to effectively zero. And guess what? They recovered, right? Within a couple of years, they were back to pumping as much oil as they were before the crisis. So I would just say there's no deus ex machina here. We're not getting out of this with a silver bullet. And if this war ends with Iran in control of the world's most important energy choke point, which is the Strait of Hormuz, it's going to be a big loss for the United States.
Edward Fishman, always great stuff. Really great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah,
appreciate
my pleasure.
it. Still to come on The Takeout, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham joins me here in studio. The latest on the legal fight over universal child care in New Mexico, which she brought to fruition. Also, battle of the tech billionaires, Elon Musk versus Sam Altman. Yes, some people are taking in the popcorn, kind of enjoying it all. But this trial could have significant influence over the future of artificial intelligence, not just their interpersonal dynamics. Plus, Florida's legislature approves Governor DeSantis' plan. He drew it up himself to remake the state's congressional district map. I talked to the Florida chair of the GOP. Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to The Takeout. New Mexico is facing a challenge to its free universal child care program, which is the only one of its kind in the country. Some Republicans in the state argue it was implemented before New Mexico approved funding for it. To learn more about this situation, New Mexico Democratic Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham is here with me now. Governor, always good to see you. The headlines suggest this program is either stalled or somehow legally canceled. True, untrue? Look at me. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
Untrue.
if it's not so difficult. Yes.
Well, sometimes, but not today. Not true. And it's not Republicans. It's a Republican who's a candidate for governor, who I think was looking for a little earned media to try to get some attention for a campaign he's not winning. But it's unfortunate that you would use that. It's wildly popular. It was a bipartisan program from the very beginning of its inception. And we've got 13,600 new families getting universal free childcare and 262 new providers. And if you were going to take on an issue, this is not the one where you take something so desperately need and appreciated by New Mexico
So when coverage in the state has lead paragraphs that say the program has been paused, that's not really accurate?
No. So what they're saying is that he's filed a legal challenge. And if I don't answer the legal challenge, then it could be paused or suspended. Well, I've never not answered a legal challenge, so there's no chance of that.
And what is the funding mechanism? Because I think a lot of states would like to know, how is it that New Mexico by itself can fund universal child care?
Well, we didn't do it overnight. And so I'm going to answer that question directly, Major. But this has been 5 years of smart, very precise infrastructure building. And we started with $300 million, put it into a trust fund, used some oil and gas money to also create additional revenue streams. That's now $10 billion. And that is a significant portion of the funding stream. And then second, we have a huge endowment fund for education and educational support services. And New Mexico voters also, by the way, enshrine child care in pre-K into our Constitution, which is why I know it's legally authorized.
What's covered and who qualifies?
Everyone qualifies. So it's 0 to 12. The older kids, it's before and after school, because that's part of your child care system. So it's 6 months to 12 years of age, full-time, part-time, weekends, overnight, whatever a family needs, we're investing in program development to meet those needs.
Article from Reuters, April 27th, caught my attention. Headline, as New Mexico probes Epstein, local survivors come forward. Lead paragraph. Authorities in New Mexico are trying to determine how many local women and girls were abused by the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein at his isolated Zorro Ranch compound. What's going on and what do you fear might have happened?
Well, my fears, I think, of like everyone around the globe, not just here in the United States, our fears have been realized. There are real victims. There were real atrocities. And
at Zorro Ranch.
Well, I don't know. Everywhere, it looks to me, it looks like he wasn't very stationary, and it looks to me like this was a very organized effort at grooming and abusing women and maybe young men as well. All disgusting, all needs to be dealt with. And frankly, if Congress would do a better job making sure that all of the files, not redacted, everything released, then we would know more about properties like Zorro Ranch. But New Mexico's not going to wait. We're not good at waiting. We're good at resolving and holding people accountable. So the legislature, bipartisan, created this Truth Commission. They have subpoena power. The Attorney General's already done some precursory investigatory work, and he's joined by the state police.
On my program, when the Attorney General was with me in Washington, he confirmed that there were searches at Zorro Ranch. Included in those searches were evidentiary pursuit of possible human remains.
Yep. Now, I don't know that...
and he didn't either.
Yeah, and we don't know. But they are going to not just probe. This is a serious effort at supporting the victims and giving them their justice and holding people accountable.
And not waiting for the federal prosecutors.
And not waiting. But in fact, we also don't want to diminish federal prosecutors' role here. They have a responsibility, and so does Congress, to make sure they do their job. So it's not a replacement, but it's certainly a good indicator that we're not going to wait for somebody else when we believe unequivocally that there are serious issues that we must deal with and that there are victims in New Mexico or who were brought to New Mexico who deserve justice, and we're going to do everything in our power to give them that.
Governor, there was a pretty interesting development today in Maine politics. The governor of Maine, Janet Mills, announced she was suspending her campaign for the Senate. You might have been the first, or very nearly the first, governor to endorse Janet Mills. What's your reaction?
Well, I'm sad, given that I know what an incredible record that Janet Mills has had and will continue to have for the next 7 months or so in office. I mean, she's given 16 plus years of incredible public service to the people of Maine and, frankly, to the country. And I'm, for one, saw her in person challenge the White House and make it really clear that she's going to follow the rule of law. She's going to protect Maine, every person in Maine. And I have always admired that spunk and that raw intellect from Janet Mills. I'm sure this was a difficult decision, and I support the decision for her. That she made it, and she also wants to do what's best for the Democratic Party in her state and take on, I think, the Republican incumbent, and feels that this is the best way to do it.
But it now makes it clear that Graham Plattner, who was challenging her, is going to be the Democratic nominee. Do you think that this result, this decision by the governor, Janet Mills, was emblematic of a tension within the Democratic Party establishment, old or perceived to be older Democrats and younger, more progressive, more firebrand type Democrats?
Well, I think in this sort of brand new entertainment kind of, and I'm not suggesting that that's who this candidate is, so let me take a step back, but rather sort of internet, we need these viral moments, we need excitement. I mean by that, the sort of entertainment value where you get people's attention, and we've all learned to do that. Thank you to the internet. I think these tensions are more likely to be perceived by folks as serious divisions in both the Republican and the Democratic Party. But I think that folks at the end of the day are looking for two things: folks with new ideas and value systems that match their own, which is not occurring in the Republican Party, who really understand affordability issues like New Mexico and universal free child care. But also, I hope that folks don't move away from folks like Governor Mills, pragmatic, experienced leadership in these hard executive positions. Now, this is a more policy position, but they're hard jobs, and I hope that both parties sort of bring these two things together, and that it's not about a divide, it's about marrying them up in a productive fashion.
You can have a viral moment or two, but you better deliver on the other side of that. Governor,
better.
I appreciate it. New Mexico Democratic Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Always, Major. Thank you.
Florida's moving ahead with its plan to redraw a congressional map. Could give Republicans as many as 4 House seats. We'll discuss with the chair of the Florida Republican Party on the other side of this break. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. The chairman of the Florida Republican Party, Evan Power, joins me now. Evan, great to have you on the show. I want to play for you what Kathy Castor, Democrat from Florida, said to me earlier this week about the new lines drawn in Florida, and get your reaction on the other side, if you'd be so kind.
In our state constitution, not only are you disallowed from drawing a district based upon a political party or to favor an incumbent, but you do have to take in mind racial considerations. Districts are directed to be compact. The governor is way out here. He's really seeking the favor of the president. The scuttlebutt is he would like a job because his term comes to an end in November.
Evan, your response.
Well, the Supreme Court case that was decided yesterday says we don't have to draw for those racial considerations. That eliminates that constitutional amendment that we have in place. So what this map does is takes earlier last year, we took out a district in North Florida that was drawn for those racial considerations. Our Supreme Court upheld that. Now we're going to the rest of the state and cleaning up those districts, drawing fair districts. And when Floridians are getting a choice to choose who their representative is in a fair a fair district, they will elect more Republicans.
You said recently that the state of Florida was shortchanged in the 2020 census. Just a bit of housekeeping, Evan. The Trump administration was still in power in 2020. They conducted the census. How did they shortchange Florida?
It was the analysis that was done after the fact by the Biden administration. They admit they used some analytics that made some changes to those numbers. And at the end of the day, we got less representation, and California and Illinois got a little bit more. And so we're shortchanged. If you look at where the population is, we're growing place that needs more representation. And we were shortchanged by that census, and we're going to have to fix it in a couple of years when we get back to the next census.
Evan, what effect will yesterday's Supreme Court ruling about Section 2 of the voting rights have in future redistricting in Florida?
I think you're seeing it happen right now. Gone are the days of the snake-shaped districts that were drawn for a particular racial reason. And when you look at the map that we drew yesterday, it is in boxes. It looks fair. It looks a lot different than the gerrymanders that exist in blue states. And I think you're going to get fair elections here in Florida. And when voters make those choices, they're going to choose representatives that are Republican here in Florida.
Evan, you've heard the term dummy-mander. That is where a party in power, whether it's Republican or Democratic, redraws district lines, makes some of them more competitive, hoping to enlarge what they already have. But in a wave election, those newly competitive or slightly more competitive districts can go the other way. Any fear that you're creating a dummy-mander scenario in Florida?
Major, I don't think we're doing that. I think people don't understand how different Florida is from 8 years ago or 6 years ago. We have a 1.5 million Republican voter advantage here in Florida. And to put that into context, in 2018, Democrats had a 400,000 voter advantage. You're seeing people move into this state because we were the beacon of freedom during COVID. They like the free state of Florida. And we're becoming more and more Republican every day. So I know that when we fight on the battlefield, Hakeem Jeffries can bring his campaign operations down here, but we will win, and we can let the Democrats waste and burn more money here in Florida so we can win some other places.
So what I hear you saying, Evan, is when Democrats, as they frequently do now, point to special election results in other parts of the country saying they're overperforming, polls in certain congressional districts show President Trump's ratings underwater as compared to 2024, you're telling me Florida will be resistant to all of those national trends?
I think Florida is a safe Republican state. People don't understand how great it is. You know, we have special elections that are special. I don't read too much into them. 2 years ago, people were saying we were going to lose Florida because because of a special election. We won the state for President Trump by 13 points. The people here in Florida love President Trump. He's coming here tomorrow for that reason. And we're going to win elections here in Florida very big for Republicans. And we're going to be resisting any trend anywhere else in this country.
Florida Republican Party State Chairman Evan Power. Evan, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Major.
Coming up, Elon Musk once provided funding, a substantial amount of funding, by the way, to help launch OpenAI. Now he is suing. How this case could influence, you guessed it, the future of artificial intelligence. And we'll talk about a lot of other AI things, too. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Elon Musk's testimony concluded today in his lawsuit against OpenAI. Musk is accusing CEO Sam Altman and his company, that's OpenAI, of making him believe early that his investments were helping to launch a nonprofit that would benefit humanity. OpenAI became a for-profit company in 2025. Lawyers for OpenAI have rejected these allegations. The CEO of The Atlantic and host of the Most Interesting Thing in AI podcast, Nicholas Thompson, joins me now. Nick, it's great to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you.
Help my audience understand what's at stake in this trial. I know it's contract law, I know it's personalities, but maybe it's the future of artificial intelligence?
I mean, what's at stake is really the future of OpenAI.
Okay.
If Musk wins the case, and he wins on all of his claims, it would be incredibly damaging for OpenAI, which would be very good for Musk's competitor, xAI.
And if there were to be one fewer competitor in this space, what practical effect would that have on the future evolution of artificial intelligence?
Maybe it would go a little bit more slowly, but I don't think it makes a huge difference. If OpenAI were the only AI company, there would be a lot more at stake. But there's Google, there's Anthropic, there are all these open source competitors, there's Chinese models. So what's really at stake is OpenAI.
Speaking of the Chinese, Bernie Sanders did something very interesting last night. He had a symposium on the future of artificial intelligence with American developers and Chinese developers, trying to figure out some way to have a conversation about guardrails.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate that?
Well, I think that the best possible outcome would actually be if the United States and Chinese developers could work together. If AI becomes incredibly powerful, you're going to need the two sides to work together. As it is right now, we're splitting further and further apart, and you're seeing new things happen every day. So I'm glad that Sanders is doing this.
Nick, you said if AI becomes super powerful. So much of what I read says that it's inevitable. It cannot be stopped from becoming super powerful. And if we don't begin to erect guardrails now, it will at some point get beyond our ability to do so.
Well, it already is super powerful. It will continue to be super powerful. We certainly do need some kind of societal guardrails. We certainly do need to figure out job transitions. But think about it this way. How many companies have actually been fundamentally changed by AI? Not that many, right? You go and I give a talk about AI and I say, hey, if you're a CFO, raise your hand if your company's 5% more productive because of AI. No hands go up, right? So AI is an extremely powerful tool, but life is complicated and messy, and it's not like your computer screen is suddenly and instantaneously going to turn the world upside down.
I want to read to you something that I came across. It's a paper from researchers at the University of Pennsylvania and Boston University. It was called The AI Layoff Trap. Here's a summary. With over 100,000 tech layoffs in 2025 alone and 80% of the U.S. workforce exposed to AI displacement, the narrative around automation has largely focused on human tragedy versus corporate triumph. We picture displaced workers struggling while tech-enabled megacorporations rake in unprecedented profits. But a glaringly important game theory paper from these researchers reveals a much darker reality. The corporations aren't winning either. In fact, they are mathematically trapped in a suicide pact, meaning they lay off more and more people. Consumer ability to purchase because you don't have a job anymore takes away demand, takes away their own ability to function in this economy. Evaluate that.
All right, so that is a
that's a doomer.
That is a
that's
dark
hard doomer.
Why don't I make the opposite argument and then we can try to meet in the middle. So the opposite argument, wait, no tool has ever given people the ability to learn as much and become intelligent as quickly, right? You can learn a new language, you can learn new skills. You sort of have an infinitely accessible helper. Companies can become much more efficient, which should make prices go down, right? If your toothpaste company becomes so much better at making toothpaste because they have the incredible machines, your toothpaste will cost less, right? So everybody benefits. Not only that, look at the U.S. stock market over the last year. It's done pretty well because of these AI companies, right? We're creating
massive
new jobs,
investment.
we're creating new companies, we're creating new things. Also, horse and buggies. They went away, they were replaced by cars. All these people used to whip the horses, right? Like they lost their jobs. But then the cars were able to drive everywhere. So we don't know right now. Like it is possible that AI will lead to this future where stuff changes too quickly and companies are put out of business and people are displaced and society can't catch up. It's also possible stuff's going to get better.
Part of the argument of this paper is that once one company sees a competitor lay off a bunch of people and increase efficiency with AI, they will be forced to match or exceed those layoffs to make sure their stock valuation stays up, and that this is a continuous and unstoppable loop.
But here's where it might stop. First company lays off people because of AI, and this is what we're kind of seeing right now. The companies that are laying off people because of AI, they're not actually doing better because it's hard to have AI replace people. So it may be the case, that AI can really replace people and we can have like an avatar hosting this show. But you know what? I like going on with you, right? It's better, right? And most companies function the same way.
That, Nick Thompson. God bless you for saying that. Talk to my audience very briefly, Nick, about the squabble between Anthropic and the Department of Defense and Mythos and its still application being used by, believe it or not, NSA, National Security.
So there was a very intense squabble. Your viewers all know about this, where the Department of Defense said, no, Anthropic, we are not going to use you. In fact, we're going to try to shut you down because you have disobeyed us and you have refused to do what we say.
You're a supply chain risk.
You're a supply chain risk because Anthropic doesn't want to, want some control over how its product is used. It's a pretty interesting fight. After that happened, Anthropic released a new model, Mythos, or produced, didn't release. And it had great cybersecurity capabilities and the ability to hack other websites. And I guess if the Department of Defense decided that it absolutely wouldn't be hypocritical, they would have said, we're not using it. But they're practical. They want to use it. Like if there's a tool to hack into a website. And as an American, don't you want the Department of Defense and the NSA to have the best tools? Wouldn't you rather, as opposed to our adversaries? So I consider it a rational choice on the government's part to say, you know what? I know we were mad at you. I know we're trying to destroy you as a company, but can we just use this product for a little while?
Nick, I am endlessly fascinated by artificial intelligence and all of its implications. I say every night when I end the show that we are relentlessly curious here. That is 100,000% true about artificial intelligence. Will you come back? Because I want to have this conversation.
Oh, I love talking about it. This is the most interesting thing happening in the world right now.
Thank you so much. Still to come, we take a first look At the first broadcast of CBS World News Roundup, how the historic 1938 broadcast covered Austria's fall to Nazi Germany. You're going to want to listen, and listen good. That's next on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Now to our CBS radio clip of fame. I promise, I really promise, we will get to CBS News radio coverage that is chronologically closer to our contemporary times. But I am featuring CBS radio news coverage from the 1930s and the 1940s because it recorded, for all time and for the first time in this new medium, world-altering events. So much so that CBS created the World News Roundup, which came to be the longest-running network radio news broadcast in history. What you're about to hear is the first such broadcast. The date, March 13th, 1938, and it captured the fall of Austria to Nazi Germany and all that would portend.
Tonight the world trembles, torn by conflicting forces. Throughout this day, event has crowded upon event in tumultuous Austria. Meanwhile, the outside world, gravely shaken by the Austrian crisis, moves cautiously through a maze of diplomatic perils. Since the German troops crossed the Austrian border on the historic invasion last Friday, news has flowed across the Atlantic in a steady stream. The German chancellor now winds his way through the conquered nation in a parade of triumph to end in a tremendous spectacle in Vienna. As German troops swarm across frontiers in their first offensive since 1914, momentous decisions are being reached in the capitals outside Germany. And so the world spotlight, for 3 days fastened upon Austria, is shared tonight by London's tiny Downing Street, by the Quai d'Orsay, whose buildings of state line the Seine River in Paris, by other chancelleries throughout the world. To bring you the picture of Europe tonight, Columbia now presents a special broadcast, which will include pickups direct from London, from Paris, and such other European capitals as at this late hour abroad have communication channels available. This is Bob Trout speaking to you from New York, opening Columbia's shortwave transatlantic program to cover the key cities of Europe. But before switching to our first European capital, let us look once again at the latest news bulletins with swift, fresh details of a Europe in turmoil. From the Press Radio Bureau comes a summary written from news supplied by the Associated Press, the United Press, and the International News Service. And here's a quick glimpse of the critical situation in Central Europe. Right at this moment, Austria is no longer a nation, but is now officially a part of the German Empire. Austria and Germany are being welded together under one command, one army, one policy, one economic compact. The Nazis are driving with all their might to bring Austria under complete Nazi domination.
The World News Roundup went first to London, then to Paris, for it was France that felt the tremors of war more directly and with greater trepidation.
For news from Paris itself, flashed across the Atlantic from the French capital, we turn to the voice of Edgar Maurer, Chicago Daily News European correspondent since the World War. A Pulitzer Prize winner, Mr. Maurer is now head of the Paris bureau of the Chicago Daily News. We take you now to Paris, France.
Hello, America. This is Paris calling. Here is Edgar A. Maurer.
With the invasion and conquest of Austria, the true nature of German policy has, in French eyes, become completely clear. Nazi Germany has thrown off the mask. Its aim is revealed, not the innocent and inevitable search for some theoretical equality, the famous Gleichberechtigung, but a bid for the mastery of Europe, a mastery to be based neither on productivity nor on civilization, but on brutal, naked force.
Nazi Germany had thrown off the mask, brutal force, the aim, mastery of Europe, fearful times to come. It was all too real and present on radio sets across America because of CBS. Happy Thursday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report is next.